Yeah,
So,
and I think we found our home on the IT side early. We were, I think the best at just about anything are good mimics, and I'm an excellent mimic.
yes.
So I can be creative. I can get in a room and think up good ideas, but I'm also really good at looking what other people do and saying, oh, how could I leverage that or adapt that to what we do? So I say all that to say I met Paul Dippel early on. And so I was a Paul Dippel disciple, is probably overstating it, but I listened to Paul. Not always the first time, Josh. So I'm like any man who's been successfully married for 28 years. I eventually listened, but maybe not the first time. So I was the same with Paul. Paul taught me that we needed to pick a lane and focus in that lane, that we couldn't serve all types of clients. And I don't remember the numbers exactly, but I think Paul used to preach that there's 7 different bands of client size. And, you can make a great living serving any one of those, but you'll make a terrible living trying to serve all 7. At first I'm like, yeah, but we're different because everybody says that, right? And then, Paul would say it again, and we'd look at our financials and he would go, no, look there, and this is what you need to do. And ultimately we listened, Josh, and that really paid off. And so when you look at what we've done with fewer than 100 customers to be the size we are and the scope we are, that really comes back to a lot of what Paul preached and ultimately me listening.
All right. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of From the Trenches of Bering McKinley Vision podcast series. If at the end you feel like we earned it, give us a like, a share, a subscribe. It means a lot to us. But today we've got Milton with us. Milton, how did you find yourself in this crazy MSP world?
Oh, wow. Great question, Josh. So I started a company in 2007 that was from an industry I knew well, the office equipment industry. So I would say grew up, cut my teeth in sales, selling copy machines, office equipment, color printing equipment in the mid 90s, late 90s, early 2000s, and ultimately worked for Ricoh as a director of sales for one of their brands for the US. And decided I wanted to start my own business. And so where do you go when you want to start your own business? Most of us, I think if we're intelligent or lazy, you can put your own verb there. Or adjective, I should say, we would go and start a business in something we know. I knew the office equipment business, so I started a copier dealership. So the really long answer to your short question is, after about a year in that business, we realized that the managed network services, what we called it at the time, MNS, was not only necessary to sell and service equipment well, but was the fastest growing piece of what we did. And so I won't even say we pivoted. We weren't mature enough to even recognize that term, but we just embraced it and we chased it. And we ended up waking up one day 2 years down the road and said, oh, holy moly, we're an IT company now.
Yes. Well, that's very interesting to me. And I know we've got our mutual acquaintance in Ray. I met him in about 2017 or 18. And, we'd been working with MSPs for, 17, 15 years at that point. And he talked about print and talked about copiers. And I'm like, I don't even know what that is, and then, 2 short years later, we found ourselves in an organization called the CDA, the Copier Dealer Association, and helped them spin up a subcategory called the MTA, the Managed Technology Association.
Got it.
So we had this like boot camp of learning enough about the copier dealer to understand them as to why their M&S or their MSP sucks so bad. And it was really fun for us because we saw these brilliant multi-generational copier dealers just completely get beat up on that M&S side of their business.
Yeah.
And it took us a while to kind of understand, why they're awesome on the copier, why the M&S was really difficult for them. But once the light bulb started brightening for me, I just quickly realized the biggest threat to an MSP in many markets is that copier dealer. They know how to sell. They know how to have loyal clients. Once they really come to full maturity on the different business model, they crush it. And we've seen that with Impact and, folks out in Denver and Oregon and, really around the country now. They're just killing it, absolutely killing it. So interesting in your world where you may be perceived as you came to the copier world really late in the game, but found your home on the IT side and obviously crushed it on that. So
Yeah,
it,
and I think we found our home on the IT side early. We were,
yeah.
you know, I think the best at just about anything are good mimics.
Mhm.
And I'm an excellent mimic.
Yes.
So I can be creative. I can get in a room and think up good ideas, but I'm also really good at looking what other people do and saying, "Oh, how could I leverage that or adapt that to what we do?" Um, so I say all that to say I met Paul Dippel early on, and so
Mhm.
I was a Paul Dippel disciple is probably overstating it, but I listened to Paul. Not always the first time, Josh. So,
Mhm.
I'm like any man who's been successfully married for 28 years. I eventually listen, but maybe not the first time.
That's right.
So I was the same with Paul. So Paul taught me that we needed to pick a lane and focus in that lane, that we couldn't
Mhm.
serve all types of clients. And I don't remember the numbers exactly, but I think Paul used to preach that, there's 7 different bands of client size. And, you can make a great living serving any one of those, but you'll make a terrible living trying to serve all 7. And at first I'm like, yeah, but we're different because everybody says that, right? And
Right,
then,
right, right.
Paul would say it again, and we'd look at our financials and he would go, no, look there, and this is what you need to do. And ultimately we listened, Josh,
Yeah.
and that really paid off. And so when you look at what we've done with fewer than 100 customers to be the size we are and the scope we are, that really comes back to a lot of what Paul preached and ultimately me listening.
Yeah, outstanding. It's with the spouse thing. It's you know, dozens, if not 100 times, I'll meet with a client, and the spouse will join for day one, and we might be sharing some ideas with the owner, and the spouse is just sitting there shaking her head, saying, "Remember, I told you that. Remember, I told you that." It's so funny,
I can
now
see
I
that.
can kinda say, "Now you've probably told him that already," and she's like, "Yep, I have." So it is just that human nature to need to hear things over and over and over again. Let me ask you, Milton, one of the things I believe I learned about you is that you spent some time in the Army.
I did, yes. So,
Yeah,
two stints, if you want to think of it that way. I went to
yeah,
Virginia Tech, and I was in ROTC. And after my sophomore year, I was floundering's probably not quite the right word, but we'll use it. Not my grades weren't terrible, but I had no direction. I had probably changed my major 4 or 5 times. I don't know what I want to do. The only thing I really liked, was ROTC. So you know
yeah.
what? That summer, I decided to leave school and join the Army and enlist, and it was, in hindsight, one of the smartest decisions I've ever made in my life.
Yes,
Maybe second only to marrying my wife, Sarah.
yes.
And the reason for that is I was 20 years old with a chip on my shoulder about the size of, a small car, and 125 pounds soaking wet, smart mouth, and I needed somebody to jerk a knot in my tail physically and probably also metaphorically. And I got that in the Army. So, I mean, I can still remember the day, and I've told the story to many people. There's a guy named Sergeant Spence. So, Sergeant Spence, if you're listening, this one's for you.
That's right.
Um, but I was in the motor pool in Germany, being a smart aleck, cutting up, amusing the troops, class clown, whatever you want to
Yeah,
say. And I've been told 2 or 3 times to kind of cool it. And about the 4th time, Sergeant Spence pulled me around behind a row of vehicles, put me at parade rest, and proceeded for about what felt like 45 minutes, but probably 3 minutes
you're right.
in reality, to tell me what he thought about me as a human being and as a soldier and as a
Yes,
man. And that Milton, who at that time was 21 years old,
right.
um, actually listened.
Nice.
And I went back to the barracks that day, and I remember that laying there in the bed that evening, thinking about what Sergeant Spence had said and that what other people saw when they saw me. And it was a little bit of a life-changing moment, Josh. It was a wake-up call I needed. And so anyway, I'll give you the short version for the rest of it. I became a really good soldier almost overnight, like literally almost overnight. I was a smart
Yes.
guy. I was good at the training piece, and I listened, took direction, got promoted, became a non-commissioned officer fairly soon thereafter, earlier than some peers. I had some college credits, which helped me with some scoring. Um, and then ultimately got selected to go to a program called Green to Gold, where you get to go back to college on the Army's dime, finish your degree, and take a commission as an officer. And so I did that. I went back to Virginia Tech on an Army scholarship, finished out my college, got a history degree, took a commission as a second lieutenant, went right back in the Army as an armor officer, and served for several more years. So that's my Army career.
Outstanding. And you, what were you, an 88 Mike being in the motor pool?
No, we were in the motor pool with I was an 11 Mike with our Bradley fighting vehicles, getting them ready for inspection. And that's what I was being a
Oh,
smart aleck about. If you know how you get ready for inspection, you basically spray paint everything.
yep,
So
yep,
that's all
yep.
beautiful when they walk down. And like, well, once you spray paint it, it's not going to work very well. And I was pointing out the flaws in the system, but
Yes,
the system is not meant to have its flaws pointed out, especially not by an enlisted soldier.
that's right. So, okay, so an 11 Bravo was an infantryman. 11 Mike must have been,
Mechanized infantry. Yeah. So
you,
11 Bravo is what they call a leg infantryman. So, 11 Mike is mechanized infantry. So you're riding on a infantry fighting vehicle.
So were you at Fort Knox for your AIT and basic?
No, I was all at Fort Benning, Georgia. Fort Benning's
Yeah,
Wayward School for Boys. So I went to Fort Knox for armor officer course
that's
when I went
right.
back in as an officer.
Oh, outstanding.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's outstanding. I did my basic at Fort Knox and my
Oh,
AIT down at Fort Sam Houston. I took Fort Sam Houston. I was 91 Bravo, 91 Delta medic
medic. Yeah.
and surgical tech. And so totally different experiences as many people can have in the military of, what all the training looks like. But I had a guest on a couple weeks ago, and she was, and I'll ask you the same question. She did like the Navy's version of green to gold.
Okay.
She was an E8, and
Wow.
she went back and got her officer rank as an E1, and it was hilarious listening
Yeah.
to her stories of how she went from everyone bending over backwards for anything she needed. Didn't matter if they were officer enlisted. They took care of those E8s, and suddenly she's an
Now she's an
O1,
ensign.
and
Yep.
no one cares.
You're
She's like,
exactly right.
it was a
Bottom of
big
the
trip.
barrel. So I remember this, and you got to, as they say, don't show them all your moves the first half, right? I think that's a Coach Calipari saying in UK, but regardless of who actually said it, I learned a couple of different times in my military life, of when to put everything on my uniform and when not to.
Right.
So I had served in combat
Yes.
in Operation Desert Shield, Desert Storm. So I had a combat patch, I had some other
Yes.
awards, and I had a combat infantryman badge, and so whatever. And so some days you just walk into a room and you want to be the gray man,
Yes.
and some days you want to walk in the room and you want that immediate notice of respect because of what it'll live later. And so my very first day at officer basic course, I'm in officer basic course with a whole bunch of, I had to finish my senior year at Virginia Tech in the summer semester. So I didn't finish until August. I walked in May, but technically graduated and got commissioned in August. So when I went to officer basic course in September, I'm 2 or 3 months behind most people who graduated ROTC in May. So who I ended up in course with was almost all the West Point graduates, because West
Oh,
Point graduates graduate in June, then they get 60 days leave, and then they all go to officer basic course late August, early September. So I'm in officer basic course with not 100%, but a very high percentage of West Pointers. And I thought, okay, well, I'm not part of the club. I
yeah.
don't necessarily need to be a part of the club, but I don't want to be thought of as just some, yokel.
Right.
So on the very first day, I come walking in and I had on my combat infantryman badge, my combat
Yes.
patch, and of course,
Yes.
all the instructors are senior non-commissioned officers.
That's right.
And so immediately, boom,
Yes.
eyes of
Yes.
respect. I'm not just some idiot second lieutenant who's, can't find his backside with a map
That's
and
right.
flashlight. So, and then you don't have to wear it again, right? They've all seen it.
Right.
I
That's
don't have to
right.
wear it for the rest of the time.
That's really funny. When I went to AIT for the 91 Bravo portion, it was, 90% of the people there were kids right out of basic training like myself. And I remember, I mean, we had some, Rangers, we had all sorts of people in there. And in that first week, they all had their blue backed bars and
Yep.
whatnot. And I'm like, and of course, everyone's like, oh, they're a god. And they probably followed that same thought as you, as like, I'm not going to be treated like some knucklehead kid. And,
Yeah.
like the drill instructors, sergeant should have. But so they called that out. That's really insightful for sure. Now you did that period of time at Fort Knox, uh, misery, agony, and what was the other one? Did the officer spend some time on those hills?
Yes, absolutely. And I was thinking about that. So when we went to field, so I went in, my first day of the officer basic course was like September 6th or something like that.
Yes,
And so when we got a Christmas break and we came back like January 3rd, 4th, 5th, whatever that day was, and that was when we were starting our FTX, our field training exercise.
yes,
And it was, in Kentucky, it can be hit or miss in the wintertime, right? It can be 55 degrees on January the 3rd, or it can be 5 degrees on January the 3rd.
yes, it can.
Yeah, and we got the 5 degrees. So we went
Yep.
out in that, you're in a steel box, right? You're in a basically like giant steel box
Yes,
in minus freezing weather.
yes,
It never gets warm. I mean, the engine gets warm. It's got a jet engine in the back. You stand behind the
sure.
jet engine, you get warm, but then you get that kind of, it's a false sense of warmth, right? You get that warmth behind it, and then any place else you go, you feel the cold even more than you did before you stood behind the engine. But anyway, just that the mud, I just remember the mud's caked on top and frozen, and then of course you drive over and it collapses and it's just
Yes.
nasty, icy, frozen mud. Just an awful 2 weeks. Awful.
That's right. That's right. Oh, that's funny. Yeah, I like you. I was there in a January, February, March, and I came from Portland, Oregon. I didn't know from cold, and barely knew what Kentucky even was or where it was. And I got there and I learned real quick. It gets cold in Kentucky.
It gets cold. That wind starts blowing somewhere in Canada and there's no trees to stop it.
No, there
It
is
just
not.
keeps blowing.
Well, like our guest a couple weeks ago, she came out of the military and started her business, and she had another recalibration moment of, I have a certain degree of responsibility, authority, respect on this military side. Now I'm a civilian.
Yeah.
How that transition is going to work? How was that for you? Kind of transitioning out of, it sounds like 8 years in the military into civilian world.
Yeah, good question. I don't remember that as being anything really crazy, Josh. So I got a job as I was deciding to get out of the military. And the reason I decided to leave the military was really budgetary, budget, not mine, but the U.S. government's at the time. They were really doing a drawdown of forces and they were doing a drawdown of training money. So essentially, I'm responsible for a bunch of young men at the time that we might have to go to combat. I had been to combat, and we weren't allowed to put gas in our vehicles and take them out into the field some days, right? You had to go out
Wow.
and simulate it, almost like playing war. And that wasn't every day. But that's just that was the state of affairs at the time in the mid 90s. And, I woke up one day and I'm just like, I had thought I was going to be in the army, for 35 years and I was going to be, a 4-star general and all these things. I had this straight grandeur in my head. And I just woke up one day and I realized that wasn't my passion anymore. So I got
Right.
out and I got a great job working for a great company out of Cincinnati, Ohio. I was in Louisville, Kentucky, but the company was headquartered in Cincinnati. And so it wasn't a big transition for me. I think my boss actually was a guy named Tom McMahon, now runs Milner in Florida. And Tom was also military. He'd been in the Navy, but that's sort of the military. So um, I tease. Um, anyway, so Tom understood, I understood. We both had good military bearing, and that translated well.
Nice, nice. And w- I think the military just does so much for us. And I kind of categorize a lot of this kind of stereotype on, D3, D1 athletes, military. Those are kind of like just great candidates so many times, whether they just know competition, they know discipline, they know teamwork. Um, when you started your career, and especially the part where you were selling copiers, um, did you find that helped you at all, or were you just who you were no matter what, or would you say old Milton
Oh,
may have struggled in this role, new Milton, this just feels really natural?
that's a really good question, Josh. That's a really thought-provoking question. So I think old Milton would have made it work because
Mhm.
part of what made old Milton successful was perseverance.
Mhm.
Just I'm gonna figure it out or I'm gonna get it done if it's something I want to get done, right?
Right.
The new Milton realized that it's not always just what you want to get done, right? Part of what
Yes.
I learned in the military is it's not just what I'm excited about today, but whatever the mission is, whatever the task is, sometimes that may not be something I get excited about, but I still need to do it and do it well. And part of that just comes with maturity, right? And maybe I got that maturity, in a 15-minute conversation in the motor pool, right?
Right.
In
Right.
June of 1990, or maybe that maturity came over a period of the next 6 years, right? And probably there's a little bit of truth to both, but that's the simple answer. I think the old Milton would have figured it out, but only if he wanted to do it. The new Milton was willing to do the work, even if it wasn't something that he was excited about in the moment.
Understood. Understood. And how do you know there was something that drew you to a sales role, which I say, the sales is the second hardest job in any business. Sales manager is the toughest job. So you immediately jumped
Yeah.
into the fire with what could be, the highest accountability, highest impact, all the wonderful things. You were drawn to that, whether you knew all the things that that really meant, but what drew you into sales?
Yeah, another great question. So I like to give credit to the people that were in the path along the way. So Sharon Dandino, now Sharon Cook, but Sharon Dandino at the time was the sales manager of the presentation graphics group at a company called Modern Office Methods in Cincinnati, Ohio. Now it's still Modern Office Methods, but um, I met Sharon on a junket weekend when I was in the Army, and one of my fellow Army officers had a girlfriend in Cincinnati, Ohio, and a bunch of us decided to make a road trip to Cincinnati for a long weekend so he could see his girlfriend. And essentially, she had said, "Hey, I'll get bring three guys, and I'll get three girls, and we'll give everybody dates, and we'll have a weekend out of it." So we go
Right.
to Cincinnati, and I get paired up with Sharon Dandino. Well, Sharon Dandino was happily engaged, or maybe she might not have been engaged yet, but happily dating her now husband.
Yes.
And so there was nothing there but platonic for the weekend. And so we did all kinds of fun Cincinnati stuff. It was the first time I'd only ever been to Cincinnati. We went to just did fun Cincinnati stuff. So I got to know Sharon over the weekend. Well, at the end of the weekend, the conversation had come to that I was probably going to be leaving the military and, changing careers. And she'd said, "Hey, I think you'd be great at sales." And I'm like, "What?" Like, I never even would have never considered it in my life. Like, I probably
Right.
had a bad taste in my mouth about what that actually even meant.
Sure.
But she had kind of shown me what her life was and as a sales manager and how she had started with this company. And so I said, okay. And I took a business card from her and I applied. And a few months later, I was offered a job as an entry level salesperson on her team at Modern Office Methods. And again, living in Louisville, but out of Cincinnati, Ohio.
Yeah.
And that's how I got the job. So
All right.
right place, right time, right person.
Isn't that the story so often? That's excellent. So you get in there, you obviously, I'm just presuming you did well, you did well enough, you did great. You decide to start your own company. Now we're talking MSP, now we're talking business.
Yeah.
I'm going to fast forward my question to copier figured out sales, MSP still struggles to figure out sales. Given your bona fides, is there an easy answer? Is there an easy kind of diagnosis of
Oh,
why MSP has struggled for so long?
yeah, I don't have an easy answer, but I'll just tell you what I know has worked for us. Works for
Mhm.
me, works for the people that work with me, the people that I've taught to do this. Um, we're not really selling something. We're we're partnering with these companies, and that's an overused word if you use it wrong, but we really are becoming partners with these companies. And I think if you could go talk to our customers, our best customers, our longest tenured customers, our largest customers, and ask them, what is it about ImageQuest that makes you stay with them, choose to work with them? Certainly there's going to be some, well, because of Milton, and I've known Milton forever, and that's a great answer, but that's not a sustainable answer. I think the real answer would be because they listen and we know they're with us through good and bad, right? MSP's hard. Josh, you know this. In the best of scenarios, it's hard. Um, and I think far too many people get in front of a customer before they're a customer and after they're a customer, and tell them how great it's going to be with our MSP because we do this right and we do that right. And, we have this response time and we have this many people that answer the phone and we have this many certifications, and all those things are important in aggregate. But the reality is, when we're meeting our clients from a support standpoint, you're usually meeting them when something's not working right. And the best case scenario is you bring them back to, the baseline of things are working. Um, and I think part of what we've done well and we continue to struggle with doing well is setting proper expectations with prospects and customers about what good looks like. And good looks like a partner that's going to get in the boat with you and help you patch the holes in the boat and bail out the water, versus rowing up beside you in their pretty fancy boat and looking over into your boat and telling you that you've got some holes in your boat and you need to patch them, and here's how you do it.
Right.
And again, we're not perfect. Never claimed to be, but I do think when we have a customer that trusts us, we're in it with them, good, bad, and otherwise. And there will be both through that relationship.
We'll be right back with more. But first, here's a quick message from Bering McKinley.
Most MSPs are constantly busy, chasing tickets, projects, and fires. But without structure, it's hard to know if the business is really improving. Vision from Bering McKinley is the system that helps you work on your business, not just in it. It connects leadership strategy with daily execution. Vision aligns people, process, and performance, creating clarity and rhythm from goals to results. And the Vision app brings that structure to life, helping you create policies, track goals, review KPIs, and collaborate with your BMK consultant all in one place. Behind it all, Jetson AI, your assistant inside Vision, helps you find answers, generate insights, and take action faster. With Vision, you gain visibility, accountability, and measurable growth. You're not guessing, you're improving. Vision, Jetson, and the Vision app, your path from strategy to results. Start transforming your business today.
All right, let's get back to the conversation.
Oh, so I couldn't agree more, and I like how you tell that. I'm still going to drag us back down a little bit though, and I'm kind of pulling some thoughts here as you're speaking in answering my own question to a small degree. Uh, what's the profile of the typical person who starts an MSP? They did not come from a tenure as a salesperson. They
True.
came from the tenure as a technologist, somebody who loves technology, curious about technology. Um, you kind of came through the ranks of sales. So I would be tempted to, perhaps incorrectly, to say that you created a sales-driven organization from day zero. That could very well be wrong, but no matter what, you brought some of that DNA with you. Would you agree or disagree?
I would agree. I would say what we created in 2007 and still, I think, nurture and foster in 2025
Right,
is a service-driven organization, but that's not a technology service-driven organization,
right.
right? It's almost an agnostic service-driven organization, is listening to the customer, reassuring the customer, making sure the customer knows you've got their back, you're in this with them, you're gonna figure this out with them, solve it for them, whatever that is. And then we're applying technology to that, right? Because we
That's right.
live in a technology world, but certainly didn't come at this through the lens of being a system administrator um, who decided to go start a business. And I know there's lots and lots of those out there, and I'm not disparaging it.
Right,
But I would say having my sales background made the sales part easy, which is one of the hardest parts of this, is getting customers.
right.
Getting customers wasn't ever the real hard part for me. It was making sure that we service those customers in a way that made me feel good about putting my name on it.
Yeah, that's interesting because I think the common, theme that I would hear from many MSPs is getting the prospects is really, really hard. And now whether they're wrong or right, servicing the clients, they come from a perspective that you shared, I think they probably struggle to articulate it or live it every day, as any of us would. But that just getting that prospect to the door to start the
Right.
conversation of how we are a service company is just so hard for people. As you were growing the business, did you hire people early? Were you kind of owner led for a majority of it? Tell us about that. That
Yeah.
that
Great question. So when we started out we remember office equipment only. So
yeah
yes, I had salespeople. I mean,
yeah
basically we had service technicians and salespeople and one administrator.
yeah
And we bought a little book of business. So we didn't start with 0 customers,
right
but it was tiny. And so, yeah, I had a lot of salespeople through that time, that tenure, and, not a revolving door, but when you're a small company, especially in that space, we struggled to find good ones and be able to pay them what we should pay them and all those same struggles that everybody's been through. So it doesn't make us unique. But we got our traction and then ultimately ended up with a pretty good sales team led by a guy named Brian White, who now works for, I think he's partner in another large MSP here in town. But at the time, came from the copier world, knew it well. So essentially, I kind of handed the reins of copier sales over to Brian. And then
mhm.
I went out and became the IT sales guy. I'm going to figure this out. So I went out and sold IT services. And I was the only IT salesperson in this company until 2016.
Oh
Um,
wow
so never hired another IT salesperson. Now, some of those copier folks under Brian could sell an IT deal from here and there, but ultimately we sold the copier business. And it was just me. And then I brought in who's now my VP of sales, Jay Mallory, also from the copier background, worked
yeah
together for many, many years at Modern Office Methods. And, um, and then he and I were the only 2 salespeople. And until last year, that was the case. And we've added a third, and now we're about to add a fourth. But, and I'm not doing CEO led sales anymore. We're doing sales process led sales. And then I'm a part of that sales process where they bring me in as they need me depending on the type of account. And that's all a maturing process over the last really 18 months.
yeah okay that makes sense. Now what's really curious is I heard on another podcast what you were able to achieve revenue wise and whatnot, and now I hear not until 2016 did we build that sales force to the
Mhm.
level, and it's still not monstrous.
No.
It's a great size, more than just about any MSP has, but you grew very, very well without a sales force.
Yes.
What did that look like? Because that is in my lens, that's very unique.
Well, again, I'm going to give a little credit to different people, myself being one, but I'm going to give some credit to Paul Dippel. Again, focus, focus, focus. Figure out who your target client is and be focused about going after them. That doesn't mean you don't take other referrals that don't exactly meet that target client profile. But my time, energy, effort, sales, marketing, dollars, whatever that is, was spent on going after that client. What does that client look like? And so when you do that, you land the right client more often than not. It's not always, but more often than not, than if you're just saying, we'll take anybody that needs IT services, right?
Right.
And then the other piece is I think a lot of people work well with referrals, but I've worked really well with referrals. And I got in with a couple of entrepreneurs who have started and founded and still own many scaling businesses here in Middle Tennessee. And you do a good job for their first company, they hire you for the second company. You do a good job there, they hire you for the third. Then, their friend says, hey, we're starting another healthcare company over here. We need some IT support. Oh, call my friend Milton at ImageQuest. And that really, and this is true. So when we sold the company earlier this year, we were almost 19 million in revenue. And I did some math. I'm really good at the math. I love the math, as they say,
Nice.
Milton math. But I figured out that they're 2 individuals, but these 2 owners and founders of these many companies are responsible for over $3 million of my $19 million in revenue this year. And that's not from one big customer. That is from a litany of clients that I have because they started the company, sold the company, and they're still a customer. They started the company, sold the company, they're still a customer. They started the company, still run the company, they're our customer. A guy that worked at one of their companies left and went to another company and needed IT support and hired us. A guy that worked for one of their companies left and went and started his own company and got a customer in California, and that customer needed us. I mean, so just when you blow all that out, it was almost $3.6 million of our annualized $19 million run rate came from those two gentlemen. And I wrote them both very thoughtful and well-intentioned thank you notes after we sold this company, and put that math in front of them in those thank you notes to let them know how important their relationship is to me and my family's success.
Hell yeah, that's beautiful. That's really cool, man. You better send them a gift basket too, for God's sake.
Well, we're all very close, so
that's excellent. That's excellent. So, actually, now I'm curious about something. You got your sales start over in Cincinnati, Louisville area. And you probably had a great relationship with Modern Office. Did you start your company next door? Is that when you made the move over to Middle Tennessee?
Yeah, no. So there's some bouncing around. So when I worked for Modern Office, they had a family split in 1995, and the South became Officeware and the North became Modern Office. So I ended up at Officeware.
Yeah.
In my Officeware career, I ended up in Nashville, Tennessee, where I am now, and then later as a VP of public contract sales out of Lexington, Kentucky. Then I got a graduate degree at Xavier, and got recruited out of the industry briefly, and I went to Dallas, Texas, in a completely different industry. And then 18 months later, got recruited back to Ricoh, Linear Worldwide, the parent.
Yes.
Not the parent, but the manufacturer.
Sure.
And they moved me to Atlanta, Georgia. I did that for many years. And then while in Atlanta is when I decided I wanted to own or start my own business.
I got you.
And my wife and I had lived in Nashville. We had lived in Dallas, and we sort of narrowed it down to those two cities. And I had a couple of investment partners, both of whom lived in Nashville, that were helping to fund it. Yeah. And so Nashville was just the fit. So we started this company in Nashville, Tennessee, and that's the reason.
Yeah, and that would be like the 2007 era.
That's correct. We started this process in September of 2006. Had our first real serious conversation, the three investors. And then we decided we weren't going to start greenfield. We're going to buy a company. We're going to buy a small office equipment dealership in the state of Tennessee and convert it to what we want. And so we spent 6 or 8 months kissing a lot of babies, and finally found one that we wanted, closed on the deal. I think May 6th or 7th, we closed on the paperwork, and we took it over on June 1st of 2007.
So you were in that first wave of Nashville's explosive growth over the last 18 years. I had a friend move to Nashville at that time, and it was a different city than it is now, for sure.
No question.
Is that all that kind of residential growth, I could only presume meant a lot of business growth. Did that help spark some of the awesome growth that you saw as a company as well?
Well, the easy answer, Josh, would be to say yes. But I think the more nuanced answer would be probably not, at least not directly. And the reason I answered this question in a different way yesterday to a customer who was asking me a similar series of questions for a different reason. We only have today 100 customers, literally. And so in those days, when I'm going to go with those days, our starting of our MSP, we had 0 MSP customers. Then we had 1, right? We had a copier base. We had 1 MSP customer. Then we had 2. Then we had 3. Even at our heyday, when we thought, man, we have made it, we have arrived, I think we had 25 customers, right?
Wow, nice.
So you could say, oh yeah, all this growth of Nashville helped that. Well, maybe, but the reality is what helped us was getting the right first couple of customers, and then having a couple of folks that were singing our praises out there in the marketplace. One of them was one of my investors who is very well connected, still is, in this city. And he would just basically pitch me to everybody.
That's awesome.
So that's really what helped us get there.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. So we've seen where your success lands you. I have two type of questions that I want to ask, and I'm trying to think of which one I'm going to go with. I'm going to go with this one. Can you share who you sold to?
Yes, absolutely. So we sold to Evergreen Services Group on May the 1st, which is, they own 3 operating entities underneath. So Lyra Technology is actually the technical parent.
Okay. So private equity, and we could fairly categorize Evergreen as private equity.
Yep, absolutely, 100%.
So I think there's this just theme from, a mid-size, smaller MSP, and they look at, they'll assign kind of value to private equity has entered our space. They've bought our vendors. I don't like what they've done to our vendors or, whatnot. Then they see, their competitors, sell to private equity, and they kind of carry that same kind of theme to this is bad. Now, when the check is offered to you, I don't know how many people are going to say, I'm not selling to private equity. I'm on my soapbox here, maybe. But did that have any bearing to you? Did you think, boy, do I really want to sell to private equity? Maybe you have a totally different take on it, but how did that influence you at all?
Yeah.
At all?
So fairly simple answer, but it's a little nuanced, and I'll give it to you. So when we decided as an ownership group that, after 17 years, it was time for us to seek, a financial exit of some type. A couple of reasons for that. We don't have to get all political, but at the time we made that decision in early 2024, I think the writing on the wall was that there was going to be a second term of the Biden presidency, and one of the stated goals was to raise the capital gains tax numbers that were being thrown out as high as 40% from 20. And so we sat down and said, hey, you know what? This thing's probably going to land somewhere in the middle there, but they're going to get an increase. It's probably going to go to 30%. Well, 20 to 30% is a 50% jump, which means I've got to grow the business 50% bigger than it is today to have the same value. So that's just real. That's math. That's not political. That's math.
That's math. Yeah.
And so we said, hey, let's see what our options are out there in the marketplace. At that time, we were 17 million run rate, 16.5 million run rate, racing to 18, trying to get there at the end of the year. And so I took some wise counsel from a friend who walked me down what is private equity. And he gave me really in 3 tranches. He said, Milton, there's 3 types of private equity. He said, there's private equity that is very traditional. It's what you hear about. It's kind of got the bad reputation. They come in and they buy the company, they put it under an operating portfolio, and then they put the screws to it in some way, shape, or form. They're going to drive costs out of it, drive revenue up. They're going to own it for 5 to 7 years, and they're going to flip it. That's their model, right? He said, that's option 1. He said, option 2 is more of a strategic buyer. It's going to be private equity backed, but it's going to be a large company. Like, I'll just pick a name. Antiva is a great example of that, where they're going to buy your company and they're going to absorb your company, and your brand, your logo will be gone in 180 days. Your employees will have great opportunities inside this much larger organization. If somebody wanted to move to another state or another region of the country, they can do that and keep their job a lot of times. There's a lot of upside there for employees. But there's also a lot of risk there. You get absorbed into this, $180 million company, if Antiva is the example. And, ImageQuest kind of gets lost in the shuffle, and everything we've built gets lost, really. And so selfishly and egotistically, I didn't really want that one. Right. The third option, which I didn't know existed until this friend told me this, he said is what's called a buy and hold private equity company. I'm like, well, what does that mean, buy and hold? He said, well, think of like a Berkshire Hathaway, where they make investments in companies and they make those investments theoretically for life. They're going to own that company. They're going to buy Justin Boot, and they're going to own Justin Boot forever. And they're going to help Justin Boot grow and meet all their market demands, but they're also going to benefit from the cash flow. He said, so those are out there. And let's go find some of those, because it sounds like that's really, Milton, what you're going to be interested in, is how do you keep your legacy, maximize your financial upside, minimize the downside risk for your employees and your clients. I'm like, well, that sounds great. How do we do that? And so we went out and found a couple. So at the end of the day, we ended up talking to 7 companies, a couple in each bucket, frankly. We got to know some of them, broke bread in some of their homes. I did over the course of a few months. And then we sort of narrowed down what we were looking for and got it down to really 2 or 3, and had it narrowed down to really 2. And Evergreen was one of those 2. I had known them for a long time, not from we're ready to sell to you, just having gotten to know them a little bit and liked them as human beings. Got to know them a lot better through the process. And ultimately, it just felt right. And we struck that deal. And I will just say, we closed on May the 1st. And we're now almost 6 months into this. It'll be 6 months this weekend. And Josh, they've done everything they said they would do.
Nice.
And they've done nothing that they said they wouldn't do.
Nice.
So it's, you could argue we're still on the honeymoon at 6 months. I get that. But I will just say I feel really good about where we are. I feel great for my customers. I feel great for my employees. I'm going through my first budgeting process with them. And I can even say that's been eye-opening but painless. It's not been like, hey, here's the number you have to go hit it. It's been a very collaborative process. They really are thinking about this as a company they're going to own for decades, not a company they're trying to squeeze everything out of in the next 18 months.
Milton, I owe you a debt of gratitude. That explanation of those three types is so helpful. I mean, I maybe like others, but definitely for me, I just thought private equity,
Yeah.
so and learning Evergreen's model of buy hold, man, that's really helpful to hear. And as you've said, you've had a great experience with them to this date, which is awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Again, that's not an Evergreen commercial, but I'll just give you another
sure.
just factotum. I've gotten to spend time now twice, once in May, right after we closed, and then again here in September with several other operating company CEOs that have sold their businesses, right? And it's amazing how many of these companies sold 3, 4, 6, 7 years ago, and the leaders are still there and still showing up excited to these meetings. So I think that says a lot. I think if you came to these meetings and all the original owners are gone,
Right.
that would tell its own story. But the fact that many of these original owners are still there, actively engaged, growing their businesses
Yes.
under this new ownership umbrella says a lot as well.
I think so. I use my own kind of anecdotal data point of 7 months, and that 7 months is what we typically see the average and sometimes really the max of. You sold your business, you stayed on with the buyer, you're gone in 7 months.
So
Like
you're telling me I got 30 days.
what's that?
You're telling me I got 30 days.
Oh, no, no, not at all, not at all. I did not predict
I'm
that for
teasing.
you. It just over and over and again,
No,
and
I could see
it does.
that.
Yeah, and it doesn't mean the buyer was bad. Doesn't mean the seller was bad. It's
No, it's
just
just
that
different, right?
transition of
Yeah.
it's not entirely my baby anymore. I think that's really hard.
Yeah,
Um,
they've done a really nice job of allowing it to just be continuity. And my stepbrother shared some fun information with me. He's a University of Virginia grad,
there
and
you go.
I'm a Virginia Tech grad. And so, you get to the University of Virginia comm school, the business school there, you're in that upper echelon of like the Notre Dames and the Stanfords and the
Yes.
UCLAs and the whatnots. And so we were chatting about it one day, and I talked about, what this could be and what this could look like. And he's like, Milton, he just laughed. He goes, Milton, you got nothing to worry about. These guys all went to the top schools in the country. None of them want to come run your business. They just want to own it. They need somebody that went to Virginia Tech to run this business.
That's hilarious. That's awesome. That's great, man. I love that story for you. I love that story for me. I love hearing, more about those variances and that you've had a great experience. Milton, let's do this. Let's start winding down a little bit.
Okay.
What if you could go back and think about one thing, probably, pre-sale, that if you said, boy, if I would have listened to that advice sooner, I would have been happier, calmer, more successful, whatever. Or if I, whatever the scenario is, what's that thing that you say I could have, 10x'd or force multiplied if I would have done this one couple of things that I
Oof.
now know I should have?
Well, I mean, again, we're looking backwards with a lens, right? So
Yeah, yeah,
we get the benefit of the foresight or hindsight.
yeah.
I would say I would have focused on community banks and financial services companies even sooner than we did and become the experts that we have become faster, because I
Yes,
think that's led to so much of our exponential growth over the past really 2.5 years.
that's right.
We have a lot of really good customers that aren't banks, don't hear it that way, but our focus is on community banks. We speak their language, we know their systems, we can sit down with them, their regulators, their auditors, and have intelligent conversations. But we didn't know that all at first. And if I could go back to 2013 or 14 and just tell myself that, I mean, we could be 2 to 3 times the size we are today easily.
And that's something. Oh, that's awesome, Milton. Well, I appreciate you coming on the podcast. I know you're a busy guy. Where can people find you out in the world?
Yeah, it's like they can find me at mbartley@imagequest.com, or just go to imagequest.com,
Yeah.
or check me out on LinkedIn. I'm easy to find, and I'm happy to talk to anybody who wants to bend my ear.
Well, outstanding. Well, folks, thanks for listening to another episode. And again, if we earned it, give us that like, that share, subscribe, comment in the comment field, maybe what you think about private equity or something that you heard Milton say that challenged some of your belief systems, if you like. So, Milton, thank you, and thank you everyone for joining.
Thanks, Josh.